Ladies and gentlemen, Redis geeks and geekettes, welcome to Redis Day.
Hi, good afternoon. This room is a bit emptier than it was earlier. I think you might have eaten one of your peers. That's impolite. You're actually very lucky to have this session right after lunch because I am not going to blow your mind. So you can enjoy your lunch coma, relax, and I will just tell the story of how I didn't crash and burn my startup using Redis. Well, Redis didn't prevent me from crashing and burning my startup, and we actually grew. So a good thing happened out of using Redis. So I guess at this point I owe you a little bit of explanation of what Meekan is. And we started Meekan 5 years ago with an idea that if three conditions will come to life, then we will make scheduling easier and faster and smoother for everyone. And the first one was that everyone in the world will have a digital calendar and will have it up to date. That wasn't really the reality 5 years ago. People still had paper calendars, those Neanderthals. Now everyone just has their digital Google Calendar, Apple Calendar, Office 365 really up to date. So kudos for you people. Condition number one happened. The second thing we needed was that everyone would sign up and use Meekan. And, you know, it was a little bit of marketing that would work. We weren't worried about that part. The last part we needed was that everyone would define their meetings using time ranges and time on day ranges. So instead of saying, let's meet Wednesday at 4 p.m., you would say, let's meet next week afternoon. And then Meekan would find the availabilities between everyone involved, set their preferences, shuffle around some meetings based on this flexibility, and find the best time to have this meeting and even move it around if something happens. So that was our ideal, but the third condition just wasn't happening. We were about 2 years in. We developed a client user platform for iOS, for Android, with a web app, and we had the worst thing ever. If you take anything from my conversation, from my talk, please do not build an Outlook add-in. Please, never. Just if this idea pops up at someone's presentation, just shoot him down. And we wasted a lot of time, and we couldn't find a client that people would actually interact with. And we were running out of money, and we needed to do something different, something that would bring people in and help them describe these day ranges and time ranges. And we built a chatbot based on Slack. It was 3 years ago, so it was very early. Like there was no best practices, there were no guidelines, we were just starting it, and we didn't even want to mix the code with what we had so far in the platform we had, just because we didn't know if we would even need it, and we didn't want any legacy holding us back. And we just said it's separate repo, separate running environment, we can do whatever we want. And the result was something very similar to this, where you ask Meekan for something like a quick phone call tomorrow. It understands that it's a very short meeting and it's named a call and it's tomorrow. Looks at everyone involved and finds the best times. One looks good, and you see that it's all part of a conversation between people, and the bot itself, it knows what actions it should act upon. For example, book one is booking the first option that was presented. So it's a dialogue that retains information over a few steps. It helps guide the process. And we're thinking about how to construct this thing. And we came up with something very, very high level. It looked like this, where we had our existing platform, which all our apps use. It sent out notifications to this chatbot based on things that happen. If you have a new meeting incoming and we want to help you RSVP for that, or there's a change in a meeting, just everything coming from the platform to the chatbot. And the chatbot themselves have some kind of logic inside to process messages from Slack, Microsoft Teams, and HipChat, and to do the scheduling based on the platform. So All the chatbots had to do was maintain the conversation, just act as if they're just a client that would at some point use our platform. And when we started looking at the implementation, we figured out that we're going to build some sort of a state machine, and we needed to keep state because a dialog has multiple steps and it's going to branch into a few actions, and we want to allow some transitions we want to block. And instead of having a bug-ridden slow implementation of half of a state machine, we just started with a state machine. And one of the first things we did when we just really quickly hacked together this architecture was figuring out that we need a separate place to store everything. And Redis was just the first choice we had because it worked perfectly and the same locally and in production, very easy to set up on developers' laptops. And when we wrote the unit tests for the bot, and we have like 1,600 unit tests just covering every interaction, using fake Redis is the simplest mock we could use. It was just time saving, and we knew that we get the same performance and behavior in production as we have in development. So we have our state machine, which means that we need to maintain what context we are, what we have in the last few steps, details about the meeting that we're currently organizing, like the name, the duration, the time ranges. But we also need to know what state we're in, whether we're currently scheduling a meeting, rescheduling, choosing which meeting we would like to delete. For each state, there's a whole different set of actions that people would do. So we're saving a state machine object that describes the conversation state. And you can see it's very simple pseudo, no, that's actual Python. Where whenever we get a message incoming, whether it's a click on a button that someone does in their chat app or sending an actual message or an incoming webhook, we load the conversation ID, apply this message, and save the updated state. So everything behind this is just reading from Redis, saving to Redis. And this is really important because when you add the Meekan chatbot into your team and understand that for your own Slack team, if you have one at the office and install some apps in it, it reads every message in the channel it's in. So if you ever sent password in the general channel in Slack, some bots probably have read it. Don't send credit cards especially. It means that a lot of messages come in and most of them are not even relevant. We don't want to act on them. So we want to load the conversation very quickly, figure out if we want to do anything with it, and then save it. And we have right now 20,000 teams, almost 600,000 channels, messages come in very quickly. So we load, analyze, and save very fast. Our cycle is 300 milliseconds from the moment someone sends a message on Slack until they receive a message from Meekan back. Redis accounts for about 10 milliseconds of that, so you're not the bottleneck. Having this also allowed us to have a smooth conversation smooth transition into threads, because a thread is just making the conversation more specific, and then we can maintain conversation in the same channel in different threads, where in one thread you're scheduling a meeting, and in another thread you're deleting a meeting, and those things just don't clash together. That is good. Important thing we learned was to expire, because the moment we moved to threads, a lot of threads opened up, a lot of state machines were saved, and then we figured out that we've been saving a lot of things, we gotta expire it. So please, the moment you choose to save something in Redis and you know you probably won't need it forever, think about this expiration. Another thing we needed was deduping, making sure we don't handle the same thing twice. We have a failover so that sometimes if a server is not handling a message, we want another one to take care. Our notifications, the ones coming in from the Meekan platform, should not be handled twice, because just think how annoying it is to receive the same RSVP message over and over. highly annoying. You get annoyed if it happens with a simple push notification. And that is something that disappears. In chat, all your screw-ups just stay there for people to screenshot and laugh at you on Twitter. So we didn't want that. Chat messages must also not be handled twice because, not even out of order, which is something else entirely, but also not twice because this was just make you reply weirdly. And some action that we wanted to start, we really didn't want to start over and over. For example, if we send an onboarding message to someone saying, welcome to your company, I am Meekan, the Slack bot that everyone uses to schedule their meetings. Please join us. We don't want to send that message twice or interrupt them inside while they're doing something else. So the trick we used over here was using getSet on an action key that we built based on the action you're trying to perform. And getSet is really nice. If you've used it, it sets a value and returns the old value. So if we did getSet 1 and got back 0, it means that there's no such key, we're good to go. If we did getSet 1 and got back 1, it means that someone was already ahead of us and we shouldn't do this action. So they were just like free action from Redis, saving us some time. Users wanted to manage their own notification based on the team they're in. Some teams, once they had Meekan installed, really liked it. I was surprised, but I don't know, their choice. And they wanted to use it in other teams. But in the other teams, they just wanted to use it for scheduling the meetings, but not receive notifications. So we found ourselves, whenever we added new types of notifications or whenever people showed up in other teams, we need to manage their notifications separately. So based on the user ID in this chat platform, we could have muted specific notifications and query whether we should send those notifications as well. Working with a set data structure also allowed us to do those a bit more complex queries where we're only send the message if everyone on the team still want to receive it or see it. That was really nice, really easy to do, especially the fact that it runs on Redis and not in our app. Help messages. If you've ever written something on the front end or a mobile app, you know there's usually you can do like pop-up helps. Hey, this is the first time you're doing this and that, so maybe you should know that you can easily do this. In chatbots, it's really hard because it's annoying if you just pop up with a message all of a sudden. And on the other hand, if you have a long explanation of all the available commands on each and every action that the user tries to perform, it's going to get annoyed. By the fifth time you're scheduling a meeting, you don't need to know that if you say book, it will book the meeting. You got it already. So we want to track the number of actions, and that was different per action because, for example, some things were about the team. If the team had enough onboarding events, then we know that we should cut back on the long explanation because the champion already knows what to do. If a channel already scheduled a few multi-time zone meetings, which are pretty complex, and you can add some commands to see, show me those meeting times in John's location, and then you can see them where John is. If it's in London or San Francisco, you don't need to know that there's this action ever again. You just use it. And the chat user, we also wanted to help him receive less and less information based on what he does. And by Meekan user, because if that Meekan user pops up in 5 different chat teams, he's already seen all the important things. We can't surprise him anymore. So we're incrementing a few of the actions we do based on the way we group it. And then we can query whether we want to keep on showing the help messages or not. So by the first 5 times you're doing something, you'll get a help message, but then you're on your own. Dropdowns in Slack. Slack allows us to create a dropdown with dynamic values. The trick is that they give you 3 seconds to populate it. And we wanted to show the full address book of the user and allow queries. We couldn't go to our servers because if we try to go there, we might need to go directly to Google's address book, and that would be too slow. So the moment you start a meeting, your whole address book is populated into the context. And when we read the context, start and populate, everything just comes from Redis, super quick. Doesn't matter how big it is, Redis just handles it. So Redis was just super fast. Routing. This is part that we're still working on to improve. But we now have a lot of bot instances, each taking care of about 2,000 teams. And some messages we want to route just to a specific team because it's something that Slack wants us to post for a user. Some events are just for a specific Meekan user, and there's no point telling all servers about it. Some events just need to be fanned out to everyone because we want to, if you're invited to a meeting, and there are a lot of people involved in that meeting, we want to show the messages for everyone in it. So we don't know where those users are hiding. So what happens here is that each server at startup notifies Redis about all the identifiers it can help with, saying, I know Eyal at Meekan.com, so whenever something comes there, just notify here. And our message router just looks up the instances based on the ID and spreads it. Again, set unions, really nice. Right now we're working on converting it from posted webhooks. Our first thought was PubSub, but we're thinking about streams. It's a really good use case for just dispatching those messages. Now, the last point is just saying thank you. First to Salvatore for starting Redis, for the Redis community for keeping on supporting it, and thank you all for listening.
Thank you, Eyal. Thank you.